alcoholic, and I was married to him for 13 years. And it wasn't all bad. In the midst of that, I gave birth to an amazing, amazing son. We moved to one of the most beautiful, spectacular places I've been in the world. I began making friends. I was having fun. I'm a Hobie Cat sailor, or used to be, and I could sail my Hobie Cat right off the beach. I had pleasure. We had these amazing neighbors. And what was happening is I was starting to build a foundation. When I was 20, I had no foundation to stand on. I believe it's really important to assess different areas of your life, and you'll probably hear this from different speakers today, and it can be things such as finances, career, relationships, family, passion. When I was 20, I had none of those in place, and so I had no foundation to stand on whatsoever. 20 years later, I was beginning to build that foundation. I had family and I had friends. And I want to say that this doesn't, when I think of friends that have this big group, it can be just one friend who's near and dear, somebody who you can speak your truth with. Your family can be just one person. In this case, my family was my son. But despite that, being married to an alcoholic and in this environment, I was slowly eroding. When my husband drank, he became very angry. When he wasn't drinking, he was incredibly critical of everything I did, even to the point of having that refrigerator door open for too long. Right now, at this point in my life, I revel in just leaving the refrigerator door open as long as I want. And kind of later, when I went into counseling, found out basically I was being verbally abused. And I was starting to die on the inside, and I was starting to go numb. And I remember saying these words to myself again: I want to go to sleep, and I don't want to wake up. But this time, I had started to lay my life foundation. There was no way I would have left my young son with me. No way. So I had that. And I had some very good friends who were pointing things out to me. I had the wherewithal to recognize that I needed help. And I can remember clearly walking down the hall in a fog. And I was able to function in the world. Nobody knew anything was wrong with me. Nobody knew when I was 20 that I was at that point that I was ready to commit suicide. Nobody knew. You can't always recognize the signs. And that was why I wanted to share my story, because I wanted my friends to understand that sometimes you do not see the signs in somebody who's about ready to commit suicide. And I'm very good at painting this beautiful picture of my life. And it was only those few people that were very close to me that knew that it was different. So, I went to the doctor and got some help. And I understand the last speaker was talking about antidepressants. So, anyhow, I got antidepressants. And it lifted, they saved my life at that point in time. They lifted the fog, and I could see clearly. I was getting my strength back, and the universe said, oh, she's ready. And they handed me another life experience. I was given a promotion at my job, and I went home and I told my husband, and this wasn't entirely a positive experience, but these are all things that I've received that became stepping stones to get me to where I am today. And my husband at that time didn't say, oh yeah, Suzy, good job, I'm really excited to you. He said, well, how is this going to affect me? And I can remember just being crushed, absolutely crushed. I did a lot of dreaming during that period of time, being women and being romantics. I dreamt of having a husband who loved me and I loved him, who was supportive and dancing and taking trips and all these wonderful, wonderful romantic visions. And I had none of that at that point in time. I attempted to go forward with life in that management position, but it was causing so many issues at home that I chose to step down and allowed the company to hire another manager. It was a man who had a very shaky ego, and I was, as he put it, quote unquote, usurping his authority. My dad was dying from cancer at the time, so I was missing a lot of work, and I was fired. So now I'm losing my dad to cancer. I no longer have a job, and my marriage is rocky, and I'm dying very slowly on the inside. I can remember looking in the mirror and seeing a dead person looking back. You can be alive and not living, and that's where I was at that point in time. But then a lifeline was there. was in the form of a career opportunity, and I was invited by the National Historic Trust of Washington, D.C. to fly into a small town and teach two small towns, business owners about advertising, marketing, and collaboration, which collaboration is one of my favorite things. I poured my heart and soul into this. I had never done any presenting. I'd never created a workshop. I had done none of this, and I was a little astounded they had even asked me to do this. The day I was to leave, to fly off, I struggled with if I was even going to share what was said to me, and I decided not to, but I'm telling my husband goodbye, and he offers up the most vulgar statement I couldn't even imagine it. I mean, how could this man I've been married to for 13 years say that to me? And I did not know the words were coming out of my mouth, and again, I felt I was guided, and I said, I want a divorce. I stepped off that curb and literally walked out the door, got on the shuttle, went to Wisconsin. My nerves kicked in. You ever have something that just your nerves kicked in so much that you are, I lost so much weight in the 8 hours it took me to get there that when I got to the hotel, I was sitting on the bed and my wedding ring fell off. So, a good sign. It was an amazing, powerful experience. I did a fabulous job. I thoroughly enjoyed being in these small towns, and got home, and the universe really began rubbing things up. Our home sold. I had some money to live on. I moved 40 miles away into the small town where I had been working, and it was actually the town I always wanted to live in. And up until that point, everything I had done in my marriage was to keep my husband happy. And I had become a very skilled codependent person. The house that I bought was right next door to my son's babysitter, incredibly perfect, and she had become part of my support system and my family. And slowly, again, things started happening. People were coming into my life. I had a new friend, and she introduced me to the Abraham Hicks Law of Attraction tapes. Anybody familiar with those? I had no spiritual practice. Now suddenly, I had my spiritual connection. It was absolutely huge. I started an event planning business. I started getting a few jobs. My son was in my small town, we have an amazing counseling center for children that have been through abuse-type situations or witnessed things that were definitely not going to build them up. So he was being cared for. But even though my life was beginning to come into alignment, I was full of terror. I would get my son off to school. I would literally crawl under the covers in bed. I was so scared. It was that point in time I understood why women go back to abusive situations. It's because it's familiar. And the future scared the heck out of me. But these tapes, Abraham Hicks, under the covers, I would be listening to them. And I began to realize that I was launching my thoughts. I was setting my intentions. I was learning to receive, consciously receive, but actually, for the last 30 years, I had been receiving. And the first thing I had received was that lifeline, there's nowhere to go but up. And that still resonates in every cell in my body. There's nowhere to go but up. So fast forwarding a bit, I met a wonderful man, and he embodied everything I visualized and dreamed about in my previous marriage, except that he doesn't like to dance. But from every one of these experiences, they have brought me to where I am today. My dad dying from cancer led me to owning a nutrition store. Watching my customers at my store led me to create health programs. My dreaming led me to marrying this incredible man. But what I've come to find, too, is right now, even 2 years ago, I would say I was still an insecure person. And now I have peace. I feel I loved how you started this morning. Your heart centered right here. And that's where I operate from now, and it's truly, truly beautiful. But looking back, how did I go from being incredibly insecure and suicidal to here? And I feel that it's one of the most important things was how I built my foundation. And all of us are at different points in our life, but we can all stop and take a look at what our passion is. How do we feel in our career? Do we have support from friends? Are we happy in our relationships? You can't do it all at once, but you can take each one of those, choose one, and start working on one. And pretty soon it comes into alignment. And then you can add another one, and then that comes into alignment. And I don't know what happened, honestly. I don't have the answer to this. But at some point in the last couple of years, this incredible shift happened. And I shifted into being very comfortable with who I am. I have this really solid foundation, and I know it's solid because this past summer, business in my small town were about 18 months behind what's happened economically over in the big city in Seattle. It hit our town, and my business plummeted. In fact, the whole town did. 2 years ago, I would have been in tears. I wouldn't have been able to eat. I would not have been able to sleep. But I have such an incredible trust. But it's okay. And this downtime at my store has taken us in a really beautiful direction. So we used that downtime. But if I didn't have this solid foundation in place, if I didn't have such a trust that each and every one of us is guided, I would not be standing here today, trust me. So if you can take away anything from this, it would be being very conscious of what you're receiving, the signs and opportunities. If you even opportunities such as a random email that got me here, and okay, I am supposed to come here and try out this speaking without notes. I've never done that before. So it's grabbing opportunities and going for it. We are all spiritual beings in human bodies. We are incredibly powerful. And as the Course in Miracles says, bless yourself so you